But yeah, no, she's doing good. And then she has one of her other friends who's at Kaiser, that I know pretty well too, but she went to UCLA. I don't think you know her. Rebecca. And so she's done at Kaiser. Let me just check one thing.
Doctor, I want to make sure I'm pronouncing your name right when I introduce you. Is it Campa or Campa?
Campa.
Campa. Okay, perfect. Thank you.
All right. So everyone welcome. We're gonna play a little short video and then we're gonna have Madeline introduce Dr. Campa and then we'll get started.
Welcome to today's session, everyone.
We are PreMedCC, a student-led organization established in the fall of 2021.
Our goal as an organization was to create an online program for pre-medical students at community colleges and universities, with the hope of guiding the next generation of diverse and inclusive physicians.
And while we advertise our organization as being for community college students, our events are open to anyone.
We realize that finding guidance and mentorship in a pre-med journey can be especially challenging for first-generation pre-med students,
people that lack the financial resources, or just those who do not know people in the medical field.
One of the best parts about our events is that they are virtual, so you can do it from the comfort of your own home.
We typically have events on Fridays from 5 p.m. to 6:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, and on Saturdays from 11 a.m. to 12:30 Pacific Standard Time.
If you aren't able to attend the event, all of our sessions are uploaded on our YouTube channel.
Many of our sessions will end up with a Q&A with the speakers.
Any questions that you have, you may put it in the Q&A session on Zoom, and our team members will read them and have them answer.
After you have attended our event, you can log into our website and complete the quiz, which will contain questions pertaining to our session today.
If you score 70% or higher on the quiz, you will be awarded a certificate to show that you attended our session today.
If you want to stay connected with the upcoming events or just want to tell your pre-med friends about the PreMedCC, you can find us on Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok as @PreMedCC.
Hello, thank you for joining us today, everyone. Today, we are honored to host Dr. Olivia Campa. Dr. Campa is a general internist at the UC Davis Medical Center, where she serves as a primary care physician, the director of the post-bac program, the associate director of clinical operations for the Division of General Internal Medicine, and as a core faculty member for the Internal Medicine residency program. As an academic clinician, Dr. Campa's scholarly work is focused on educational equity and diversifying the healthcare workforce to serve the needs of California's diverse communities, as well as implementing a quality-focused approach to improve care delivery. Dr. Campa is passionate about ensuring principles of inclusion are reflected in the healthcare system. Thank you for joining us today, Dr. Campa.
Thank you for having me. It's exciting to be here. Good morning, everyone. Hopefully your Saturday morning is going well so far. So I think we have about an hour and a half together. I will go ahead and share a presentation for about an hour. It might be a little bit less than that. And then I'm happy to take questions. And as I'm going, please feel free to stop me by I will try to watch the chat. You can use the raise hand function. But I'm here for you. So I'm here to give you information on whatever it is that you need. So here we go. Let's see. All right, so I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about overcoming imposter syndrome and building your professional identity. Thank you so much, Madeline, for the introduction. I'm so happy to be here, and I really enjoy my job. I think I have a great job that's super fun. So I will share with you kind of some of the lessons I've learned through my professional journey. and share some stories and hopefully help you all build your kind of professional resume and problem solving skills so that as you enter into this next step in your career, you're prepared for all of the things that the profession will throw at you. So I'm an assistant clinical professor at UC Davis School of Medicine. My clinical work is in the outpatient clinic and the inpatient clinic. I work with residents on the clinical side, and I also teach in the School of Medicine. So I run the post-baccalaureate program, which is a program that's focused on increasing diversity in healthcare. So we take students who come from diverse backgrounds who are interested in becoming doctors and need some help educationally to kind of get to where they need to be prepared for medical school. So that's a very rewarding program that I get to do. And the other part of my job is I'm the director of clinical affairs for my division. So what that means is I oversee the faculty, I help with recruitment on a faculty side for our group, and then I oversee all of our clinical operations. So like what was mentioned before, everything I do is with a diversity inclusion lens. And I'm always thinking about health equity and how can we improve access, have better resources for our community members, and what makes up our diverse community and how can we better serve our patient population. So my professional journey, I started out really not knowing what I wanted to do. I had no idea that I wanted to become a doctor, that's for sure. I liked science and math, and really the only thing I knew was that I wanted to go to college. So I took classes that I enjoyed, which were mostly science and math classes. And I did go to college. I went to Loyola Marymount University. And while I was there, I worked 2 jobs because my parents didn't have a lot of income, so they weren't able to help me financially. So I worked a job at Loyola Marymount, and then I still needed some more money. So I got a second job at UCLA, and it was working in this clinical trial that ended up being one of the largest clinical trials ever in the country. It's actually very much a landmark clinical trial in medicine. And through that work, UCLA was the site where the national PI, so the person who had created the trial, worked at that site. And the first time I met her, I was just overwhelmed by how articulate she was, how passionate she was about medicine. And I was like, wow, that's somebody that I want to be. Like, I had really never met anyone like that who had inspired me in that way. And so I think that was my first exposure to really seeing someone in a professional setting that I was like, that's somebody I want to be like. So I was a first generation college graduate. I did graduate college, still not knowing what I wanted to do. I worked in my job at UCLA. They offered me a full-time position once I graduated from college. And then I was recruited to the VA in Los Angeles to run a research program that was in geriatric psychiatry. So I was doing clinical trials that were with patients with Alzheimer's disease. And what I loved about it was like, it was so complicated. The patients needed so much help. Their family members needed so much help. We had to do like big family meetings. And I just was like, I love this work. Like, I love working with people. I like really complicated situations. And I think I want to do this work from the perspective of being in charge. Like, I want to make the medical decisions. So what job could I have where I got to make the medical decisions? So I talked to my boss, my former boss at UCLA, and she said, well, you need to go to medical school. And I think that you're smart enough to do it. And prior to that, nobody had ever told me that I could do something like medical school. So, I think that was another lesson I learned is when you think highly of somebody, tell them, because it may actually change the trajectory of their life. So I ended up studying for the MCAT. She was like, you just take this test. It's fine. It's not a big deal. You'll do fine. You're really smart. And I'm like, what is this test? And I learned the test was the MCAT. The MCAT is a hard test. Is it doable? Yes, it's very doable. Do you have to work hard and be really focused? Yes, you have to work hard and be really focused. So I took the MCAT and it didn't go so well. So I decided to take it again, and I did just a little bit better. And I said, okay, I'm just going to apply to medical school and see what happened. So I applied to medical school and I got interviewed at 3 schools. So I got interviewed at UCLA, Drew. I got interviewed at University of Illinois at Chicago, and then I got interviewed at UC Davis. And I did my interviews in that order. And I really wanted to stay at UCLA because I was from the LA area, and that's where all my family was. But when I interviewed at UC Davis, I was like, oh my goodness, this is a place for me. Like, the people I met were incredible. I had not really met people who had had similar journeys as me in medicine. Like, everyone I worked with at UCLA, their parents were doctors or they had professional parents. And when I came to Davis, there were people who were first generation college graduates who were really passionate about reforming healthcare and like had this passion that was really palpable. And I left that interview going like, this is the place for me. Like, I have to go to this school. What do I have to do to get into UC Davis School of Medicine? And the answer was I didn't have to do anything because I had already done everything. I had been working really hard. I had publications. I had studied really hard in undergraduate and studied really hard for the MCAT. So I had already done everything, and I just had to wait and see if I got in. So I did end up getting into UC Davis, and that was where I went to school. I didn't hesitate as soon as I got my acceptance. And it was really, really hard. I had been out of school. I had graduated from Loyola Marymount, and then I had taken 4 years off of school. So I hadn't been in a classroom for 4 years. And I felt like everyone around me had photographic memories. Like, I remember meeting each person in my class and being like, oh my goodness, this person is amazing and they're brilliant. And I was fully intimidated. But I got through, and I felt like I just was like always holding on, or I felt like I was always holding on to just passing my classes and getting through medical school. And it wasn't until the end that I realized there's some really smart people around me. Like, maybe if I stopped being intimidated by them and just kind of worked with them and tried to learn from them, I could learn a bunch of stuff. It didn't help that my med school, the way that the ranking was set up, like, I ended up being in the very bottom third of my med school class. And so as we start to talk about imposter syndrome, like this feeling of not belonging or feeling left out, and then I got this great, I got my like overall performance, and it's like, you're at the bottom of your class. And mind you, I had won national awards during medical school for all my leadership and advocacy work. And then I look at this paper and I'm like, but I'm like one of the least smart people here. I don't belong here, and I don't even know if I should be a doctor. And so I think that was really hard for me because I had no reference. Like, again, there was no one in my family I could talk to. Like, of course, my parents kept telling me, you're doing great, you're doing great. And I'm like, yeah, but they don't know. And like, I just got here by chance because, someone gave me a shot, and I never really belonged here. And I don't know if this is even what I want to do. So I graduated medical school, like feeling pretty crummy, and then going into residency. So residency, for those of you who may or may not know, residency is your clinical training. So in medical school, you do usually 2 preclinical years and 2 clinical years, and you rotate through a bunch of different specialties. And then in residency, you do clinical training that's focused in your area of interest. So I decided to do internal medicine residency, which is like very well known to be very difficult. So I go into residency just being like, oh, I'm going to be the worst at this. I am going to struggle. and it's going to be pretty painful, but I'm just going to hold on. Like, I'm going to show up every day and I'm going to learn whatever I can learn. I'm going to work really hard for my patients and like be the advocate that I know I am. And I'm just going to hold on. And that's what that was my game plan. I'm like, okay, I take it one day at a time, one day at a time. That was what I told every day when I woke up. I'd be like, okay, it's a new day, one day at a time. And I just felt like I was struggling. So I nearly fell out of my chair when I was in the middle of my second year of residency, and I got a call from my program director saying, I want to meet with you. And I go to his office and he said, you know, Olivia, you're one of our strongest residents. And we love that you're such a leader and you're such a good example and you're such a patient advocate. You always put patients first. And that is an incredible thing that you do for our patients. So we've just seen how you've been able to transform people's lives. And we want you to be a chief resident. So a chief resident in trauma is like a huge deal because first of all, it's like very prestigious, right? Like they pick the 3 or 4 top residents of the program. And then being a chief resident is something that everyone always remembers. Like when you get introduced at conferences, they're like, this is Olivia Campa, and she was a chief resident of internal medicine at UC Davis. Well, not only was I a chief resident, I was the second person of color to ever be a chief resident at UC Davis. And I'm not that old, y'all. Okay, so my program director was like, you can't say no. And I was like, I said, of course I say yes. Yes. And he's like, well, don't you need to talk to your husband? I said, it's fine. He supports me. And I just thought it was such an incredible opportunity. And I also had this moment of being like, maybe I wasn't struggling as much as I always thought I was struggling. And I can tell you that like the imposter syndrome battle, like it had only just begun. So I did my chief residency year. I actually did, looking back on it, did very well as a chief resident. I ended up taking on a leadership position within the healthcare system as a chief resident and did a lot of really good work because I mobilized the residents to be invested in the place in a way that they weren't in the past. Won a bunch of awards for that work. And then it comes time for me to find a job. And my now boss calls me into his office and I'm like, oh no, I'm in trouble. And he says, we want to hire you. What do you want to do? You can do whatever you want to do. And I said, what do you mean I can do whatever I want to do? He said, you can do whatever you want to do. Just tell us what your job is and we'll make it happen. And I really didn't believe him. I thought, this guy just is like poaching me for information. I just like didn't trust anyone. And so I told him what I wanted to do and they came back with a job offer. And I was like, yeah, I'll take that job. Like, it sounds awesome. And then I entered onto the faculty. And I would say the first few years in the faculty were just really tough. And I'll kind of get into some of the things that I struggled with. And I think at some point, I just turned the corner and I stopped worrying about being an imposter, but also like lots of things changed around me to help me feel like I actually belonged in the place. And now I love my job. I feel very proud to say like I'm a very good doctor. And I think I have the best job in the world. So I hope all of you join me in medical school, and if not in medical school, something in the healthcare field, because it's really a rewarding career. So, it takes a village. So remember that I am the first person in my family to go to college. And so what does that mean? It means I needed a ton of mentorship. So these are like people who I have met along my journey who've played a huge role in my professional development. Some of them come from similar backgrounds as me, and some of them really don't, but saw something in me that they felt was worth their time and really were generous with their time. This is Dr. Aberly. She is the woman who I met at UCLA who just was like somebody that I admired deeply. really a trailblazer in healthcare, and really my professional role model. So when I think about like what I want to be in my profession, like she is the person that I think about. So what is my professional identity? I'm Latina first. Both my parents are Mexican. My mom's the first one in her family to be born here in the United States. I'm a general internist, so I do the inpatient outpatient medicine. I'm a medical educator, so I'm the director of the post-bac program, and I also do other teaching within the healthcare system. I think I'm an innovative thinker because I think I'm very bold. Like I believe very strongly in healthcare reform and health equity, and I have done a lot of work in that realm and helped move a lot of initiatives forward. And I love clinical operations. I love pulling things apart and putting them together in a way that makes better sense for patients. Again, like keeping patients always at the center of how I think about the world and how I think about my work is very important to me. And overall, I'm an academician, which is kind of, like a lot of times I look around, I'm like, what am I doing here? But now I feel like, I really belong here. I've made significant contributions both to UC Davis and to medical education within the US. So I really, really enjoy what I do. All right. So we're going to do a polling question. Let's see here. There we go. And I just like to get a sense of what people's interests are. All right, should we close the poll?
Yeah, there's like a couple more.
Okay.
All right, you guys, come on. It's only one question. Don't be shy. Nobody's keeping track of this. Nobody knows if you responded or not. Don't know what your response is. We just know the numbers. All right.
All right. I also saw the question in the chat, and I will come back to that in a little bit. Okay, most people want to be physicians, some public health officers, and some other. Great. Thank you. That's very helpful. Okay, so a few objectives for today. We're going to define imposter syndrome, describe the importance of professional identity formation in health professions, and outline some tips for you all to overcome imposter syndrome in the future. Imposter syndrome. The definition is intense feelings that achievements are undeserved, and the feeling that it is just a matter of time before others are going to expose you as a fraud. There's a very high prevalence of imposter syndrome, and especially in very competitive environments. So when you think about medical school, that's a very competitive environment. Any professional school, it's going to be a very competitive environment. Any environment where people are like climbing a ladder, that will be a competitive environment. So in competitive environments, it's estimated about 70% of people will experience imposter syndrome in their lives, meaning that if this is something that you're experiencing, just to know that it's actually very normal, that many people experience this. Not everyone talks about it. Many times people are going through a lot, and you have no idea what's going on, right? Kind of like that iceberg where they always show like what's above the water and below the water. You always need to remember that there's always a lot happening below the water that you don't know about. So it's very, very normal if this is something that you've ever felt or if you ever feel in the future. So this is kind of a depiction of how imposter syndrome can cycle itself. So you can have some anxiety, self-doubt, or worry that leads to procrastination, and it could lead to some over preparation. And maybe you get it done, like you write the paper that you have to write. You're able to accomplish the task that you had at hand, and you have a brief feeling of relief. And then maybe you even get positive feedback, like maybe you get an A on the paper or an A on the assignment. And you get some positive feedback, but upon reflection, you're like, oh, that was just lucky, or it's because I put so much effort into it. And so you actually discount the good job that you did. And then that self-doubt creeps in, think that, again, I don't belong here. And that just cycles back to the next task. So it's almost like with each accomplishment, you could be digging yourself deeper and deeper into the hole of imposter syndrome. And looking back on it, I would say like, that's very much what happened to me. Like I would win an award and I would be like, oh, I just got this by luck. Like, and I would never give myself like that moment to feel accomplished. And so then the imposter syndrome would get worse and worse. And it's a tough cycle to be in. So the effects of imposter syndrome on performance, it very much inhibits your performance. So it can increase depression and anxiety, decrease a sense of belonging, and overall decrease your performance, which is really hard when you're trying to do really hard things, right? So when you're studying for the MCAT and you don't believe in yourself and you're like, I have to sit here and study for 8 hours a day and like learn this really hard material. But then the whole time your mind is cycling and going like, but I don't belong here. I shouldn't do this. And I'm not smart enough. And like, why am I even doing this? I'm just wasting my time. Then you're not going to be able to perform at the level that you can actually perform at. And it decreases your overall performance. So it can be like a very, very important cycle to recognize, where we say like, you got to name it to tame it, right? Important cycle to recognize. And if you see it, start doing some things to actively undo it. All right, here we go. Another polling question. Who has experienced imposter syndrome so far?
Come on, only one question poll. I'm gonna close it in 30 seconds.
All right, so most people actually in the room have. So good. Hopefully through the next little bit of time, you can reflect on what your experience was, and maybe what you could do next time if it happens again. Is anyone willing to share their experience? And if not, it's totally fine. Put it in the chat. Can they unmute or no? No. Okay.
No.
Got it. Okay. That's okay. Okay. So belonging and imposter syndrome. So I think that this feeling of belonging actually goes hand in hand with imposter syndrome. If you're feeling like you're an imposter, it's actually heightened if there's a concurrent feeling of not belonging. So if you have intrinsic qualities that make you, sorry, how do I go back? There we go. Okay. Intrinsic qualities that make you different from other people. So for example, 6% of physicians are Latina, right? And within academic medicine, it's actually closer to 1.5%. So in most rooms that I walk into, I am the only woman of color in the room. And especially as the groups get smaller and smaller, so as we talk about leadership positions or committee work, that when you get put on a committee, it's very likely that most of the people in the room are not going to look like you. So is it surprising that I walk into rooms all the time and look around and go like, what am I doing here? Why am I here? Like, of course I feel that way, right? So it's when you have intrinsic qualities like how you look or maybe what your background is that's different from most of the people that are in the environment that you're in every day, it's not surprising that you start to feel like you don't belong or like you're an outsider. So finding this feeling of belonging becomes really, really important. I would say, especially when you are a person of color in a professional environment, because there's so few of us. So people of color in higher education, and you could look at law school, master's in business, master's, PhD programs. Really, this is an issue across the board in higher education, specifically for medical school. So actually this last year from 2021 to 2022, we had a pretty large increase in medical school matriculants who were people of color. So Black or African American students jumped from about 1.5% to 10%. Hispanic, Latino, or Spanish origin, 12% of medical school matriculants, American Indian or Alaska Native, 1%. So there's still a lot of work that needs to be done in our indigenous communities. When you look at the US population, we haven't hit parity yet, right? So there's a lot more Spanish-speaking patients than there are Spanish-speaking doctors. So those of you who are from communities that are grossly underrepresented in medicine, it's even more important for you to be successful because the patients really need you. There's a lot of evidence around patients and physicians who have similar backgrounds or similar life experiences. Patients actually get better health care from those providers and they have better outcomes. And so representation is incredibly important when we think about the medical school classes and the doctors that we hope to have in the future. So I always think about, this Tupac Shakur song, All Eyes on Me, right? Because whether you like it or not, the reality is that I am someone that people always remember, not because of what I say or what I do. I literally am just like, if I'm standing in a room, because I look so different from everyone else, people are always like, oh, you're like that woman who's a physician, you're like the curly headed one, they remember me because I stand out in the crowd. And as a person of color, I think this is so hard. And this has always been really hard for me because I'm actually somebody who doesn't like to stand out. I just want to go about and do my business. I don't want people to be have a magnifying glass on me or to be asking me things to be paying attention to me. I'm just trying to get my work done. And so I think that that's kind of the double-edged sword of being a person of color is on the one hand, you don't feel like you're a part of the place, but on the other hand, you're so memorable for people. And so you're always balancing those forces of like, well, if I'm having a bad day, I know that if I go to work and that bad day is showing on my face, people are going to notice. Like, I don't just get to go to work and like have my privacy, because people are like, they're paying attention to me always. And they're like, what's wrong? Why are you having a bad day? And I'm like, can I just have my bad day, please? So it can be really difficult. And one of the things that you learn is how to kind of, be a little bit more like neutral, so that people kind of let you be who you are. This is a good question. Thank you, Alexandra. Often BIPOC members are the pioneers in creating the space of belonging, which can feel like an isolating experience. How do you balance the necessity of showing up as a BIPOC leader in new spaces where we are underrepresented or not represented at all, and ensuring that we belong? So one of the things that I have done is I have really try to create spaces where people can feel like they belong. So for example, when I started in my residency program, I was the only woman of color in our program. And I went to my program director's office and I said, this is a very isolating and lonely experience. We need to change this. And so we actually looked at how we were reviewing applications for residency programs, and we redid our process. And now our internal medicine program is one of the most diverse programs in the country. And I'm really proud of that, because that took a lot of work and it took a lot of vulnerability on my part, because I had to share with people in leadership how isolated I was. And so it's oftentimes where sometimes you have to share your vulnerability to affect change in the space. And sometimes I'm not in the mood to do that. I'm like, I don't want this to be my problem. But I also am somebody who really thinks it's important to create spaces that are better for the people that come after me. And so that value is what drives oftentimes a lot of the initiatives that I do, because I'm like, okay, well, I experienced this incredible isolation, but I want to make sure that the next generation of physicians feel that they belong, so that they can perform at the level that we know that people are capable of performing at. So I always try to, kind of redo the space that I'm in, so that it can be one where people who have different backgrounds can come in and feel like they're a part of the place, and not feel so isolated. And that can be like even pictures on the wall. Like we've forced people to take down pictures before, because we were like, these are not helpful pictures. Or looking at grand rounds presentations and making people change, the pictures of the patients that they're presenting, because it's like all these patients look very uniform, but our patient population is very diverse. I think another great example of that is the work that's been done in different skin colors in dermatology, right? Like somebody said, we have to be representative in dermatology, because we can't show pictures of the same color of skin, because people come with different colors of skin. And so we need to show our diverse pictures so that people don't miss diseases in people of color. So there's lots of things that you can do and lots of ideas that you bring into the spaces that you work. And that's what makes you so powerful and so much needed, is because the view that you have of the world is going to be very different than somebody who doesn't have those similar experiences. And that's really important to bring into spaces where we're taking care of people. All right, so how does this isolation manifest itself? Well, people, when they don't feel comfortable, oftentimes are going to react in a way that can be actually not only unhelpful, but it actually can put your professional career in jeopardy. And I think this is the thing that I see a lot with our trainees, and it literally breaks my heart, because I'm like, you are so incredible and you have so much potential, and I am watching like your career unravel because the world that we live in is not ready for you yet. And you also see this when you all are taking care of patients. Like, people have reactions to things that are difficult. And a lot of times you can even name what's happening. Like sometimes, like as an example, breaking bad news, like telling a family that their loved one has cancer, and there might be like 6 children, and you'll see like one of them is rationalizing, others are being passive aggressive, one person might be avoidant, one person might be staring off into space, and you're like, they're dissociating right now. And so you can see that like everybody is different and their reactions to difficult things are different. I think it's just important to know that this is like very well studied. So if you're finding yourself having a reaction to something difficult that is not helpful for your career, it's really important to find somebody who can help you through that. And the reason is because you have been working so hard for so many years to work toward your goal, and you don't want the difficult environment to get the best of you. So for example, like displacement would be like somebody hurts you or does something to you that's really hurtful, and then you turn around and you yell at somebody. Like this happens all the time in the hospital, which is unfortunate. And I'm like, we don't yell here. This is not something that we do, right? So just to know that there's lots of behaviors that can result from these feelings of not belonging or imposter syndrome, and those behaviors can actually affect people's careers. And so really when you're having if you're struggling with the imposter syndrome, it's super important to talk to your mentor or your therapist or your whoever it is that you talk to and work through that, so that you're not bringing behaviors into your professional environment that are going to be completely unproductive for your future. All right, so what do I do about all this? So I just spent a lot of time describing this massive problem. This is like my favorite emoji. Like, I don't know what to do. You know, like I said this like 7 times a day. When someone's asking me a really complicated question, I'm like, I don't know. Why are you asking me? Go ask somebody who knows. So what do I do about all this? So I'm going to try and give you all some tools. Here we go. First thing is find a community. So this is the Latino Medical Student Association graduation. These people in this picture are like amazing people. So we all graduated a few years ago now. There's some deans of diversity in this picture. There's some just like wonderful doctors. There's a medical director at Ultimate in this picture. So there's an amazing psychiatrist in this picture who does like amazing community work with Spanish speaking patients. So finding community is extremely important because you have to have spaces in your professional career where you feel comfortable, even if it's just for a few minutes, to be able to walk into a room and be like, oh, these are my people. Like I can let my guard down. I can just be myself. Having those moments, it's like that is like the moments of rejuvenation for you. So you have to find a community. And if you can't find a community that in the space that you're in, it's telling you a community doesn't exist. And that's an amazing opportunity to create a community. So an example of this is, again, I was a resident And I was in my first year and I had talked to my program director and we had done a bunch of work. And then we had recruited the next year, like a very diverse class of new interns, first year residents. And then I was like, okay, well, now we have like these diverse residents, but they're having a bad experience. And I feel terrible because I feel like I recruited them here and now they're getting beat up on. And so I was like, okay, now we're going to form our diversity, inclusion, community engagement group, which is our DICE committee. And I'm going to tell our program director that this committee is going to advise him on issues of diversity within the residency program. So we then set up that committee. And what that allowed people to do was to come together in a safe space and talk openly about the issues that they were experiencing, so that instead of like, really it was discrimination that the residents were experiencing. So instead of the discrimination affecting their professional career, we were able to put together plans to address the issues with the different attendings, because what we noticed was there was the same attendings that were saying things or doing things that were very inappropriate. And so it allowed us, in a way that was really confidential and protective of our residents, to be able to address it with the attendings that were problematic. And this is the power of community. Like, when you form professional communities, you can then use that community to make change in a way that isn't targeting any individual person. And the last thing you all want is to work so hard in your career, like to get to this point in your career and be such a strong advocate and put yourself on the ledge and have your head chopped off, right? You do not want to be targeted, or you do not want to be in a situation where you are being blamed for something that's really a systemic problem. So that is the power of community. All right. Next tip is keep moving forward. All right. So I always say, if you can't handle the month, then handle the day. If you can't handle the day, then handle the moment. If you can't handle the moment, then just put one foot in front of the next. So I can tell you, my first job out of residency, my first clinical job, was in a federally qualified health center, which was a clinic where I was serving underserved patients, community patients, unhoused people, people who struggled with substance use disorder. I loved it. Like, I loved the work I was doing. It was really, really important for me. And I loved my patients. Like, I was just, it was so rewarding. But the clinic I was in was extremely dysfunctional, like to the point where I couldn't do my job anymore because there was so much drama and chaos going on. And so I actually ended up leaving, and it like broke my heart because I had loved my patients, but the dysfunction of the place was just tearing me apart. And I think that was a time where I really questioned myself, like, is this, like, maybe I'm not meant to do underserved work. Like, maybe I'm just not tough enough. And it wasn't that. It was just that that was not the right place for me, right? It didn't mean I needed to leave medicine. It just meant that I needed to find a better place for me where I could do the work that was important for me. And so in those times when you're really like, I don't know how to move forward, like, you literally just keep walking. And if you keep walking, what you'll see is like the air will clear and things will get better. The sun will come back out and you're going to feel like, okay, like, I have a plan again. So I always think about The Little Engine That Could, right? Like, I hope we all know this children's book where it's like the train is going up the mountain, and at some point on the hill, it's like moving really slowly, and it's like, I think I can, I think I can, I think I can. And I feel like that's always what I'm telling myself when I'm really at a challenging moment. I'm like, if I can just keep taking a step forward, it's gonna be okay. And usually that's what happens. Like, do not walk away from this career that you've spent your whole life trying to find or trying to get are trying to achieve, you just have to find the right fit for you. And sometimes that means just walking forward, and you'll get there. Work with people who lift you up. So, unfortunately, there's bad people in the world. I hate that part about it. But there are also really amazing people. And you just have to find those amazing people. So, this is an award ceremony where I was given an award for my work in mentorship. And I invited like all the people who were so impactful for me. And it was just such a lovely celebration. And I got to thank them for all the work that they have done that has helped me be able to contribute to kind of the future generations of healthcare workers. So those people are out there, and if you're not surrounded by them, keep looking for them until you find them. And then when you find them, hold on to them. And just know that, you know, sometimes people are tough, and that's okay. You just don't have to spend a lot of time with them, and that's okay. Be willing to change. I can't stress enough how important it is to have a growth mindset. All of you are going to be challenged in this work. You are going to be able to critically reflect on yourself and say, it's not that you're bad, but sometimes you do need to adjust to the things that are happening around you. I really like this because it gives some phrases like, I'll never be as smart as that person, instead of saying that everyone's talented in many ways. So adapting a growth mindset, and if your natural inclination is to be hard on yourself or be negative on yourself, to actively work to give yourself some grace. I can't do it. Instead saying, I'm still learning, I'll keep trying. So a growth mindset is incredibly important. The other thing that is important to know is like change is actually really hard, and it can be really destabilizing, and it can feel uncomfortable, and it can even be painful. And so sometimes as you're growing into the profession, you're going to have those times where you're uncomfortable and you don't feel like yourself. And all of that is very normal. And there's even going to be times when you're miserable, and all of that is very normal. All right, know when to take a break. So I love meditation. I can tell you all, like, it took me probably a good solid year to be able to meditate. I would like sit down in silence and my brain would be like, but I just kept at it because I was like, I really want to do this. Like, this is really important to me. And so I think yoga meditation is super important and helpful. And then I love to travel. This is me and my husband. We like to go all over the place. And when we leave, like when we go on vacation, no one can get a hold of me. And that's how I like to do it. So I like to give myself a break. Everything is going to be fine. Like I come back and everything usually is pretty much the same as I left it. So giving yourself that grace to take a break is super important. Like please take a study day off a week so you can recharge your battery, because the burnout is real. Become influential. So that sounds like a crazy thing, right? But sometimes you are the change that needs to happen. And so don't be scared to set your goal really, really high. These are some people who are incredibly influential. This is Dr. Telemontes. He is a very good friend of mine. He's the chief operations officer at Ultimed, which is one of the biggest Medi-Cal healthcare delivery systems in the country, really. And they're all focused on underserved care. And it's so cool to see what an amazing job he has and how he's made this huge impact on patients. And I can tell you that it's not been easy, but he's always had a vision and he's just kept marching in the direction of that vision. So become influential, because you might be the necessary leader that needs to be in that position to make change. These are some other really outstanding people that I know and get to spend time with. So I want you all to dream high and to go for those dreams, because I can't stress the importance of you all becoming the next generation of leaders. Do what you love. So I have the pleasure of being an educator, and I get to spend my time with lots of students and lots of learners and lots of residents. And it's super fun and awesome. And it's great to be able to teach and kind of help people get to a higher level of patient care. And so whatever it is that you love, make sure that you're doing it. And if you are not loving what you're doing, it's okay to walk away. So I can't stress enough how important it is to do the work that you love. So in summary, how do you fight imposter syndrome? Find a community, keep moving forward, work with people who lift you up, be willing to change, know when to take a break, become influential, and change the environment that you're in, and do the work that you love to do. All right, just a few words on professional identity and professional identity formation. So some of you may be asking yourself, like, what is that? I know for me, I was like, what does this mean? So what it is the person that you were when you were little and the person that you are today. So this is Adara, who is the daughter of one of the people on my softball team. And we showed up to softball in a matching outfit, which I thought was like the cutest thing ever. But all of you are developing your professional identity like now, and we'll continue to develop that over time. So as what goes into your professional identity, your personal values, attitudes, morals, and beliefs, your professional ethics and code of practice, and then the law, legal principles, rules, really the system that you're living in and growing in. So as you all develop your identity in your practice, it's really important to think about, like, what are the things that I really care about? How am I going to infuse those morals and values into my practice? Like, what are the legal implications of the choices that I'm making? And how can I make sure that I'm protecting my patients in the way that is helpful for them as I learn my practice and grow in my practice? I remember, like, when I was kind of very early on, like around medical school, I always felt like I had my life inside of medical school and then my life outside of medical school, and that those were like two different people. And like I had a hard time reconciling, like, Olivia Campa, myself as a doctor. It took me a very long time for me to see myself as a physician. And now I very much, that's not a problem for me. But that professional identity formation took a little longer because I think a lot because of my imposter syndrome, I'm feeling like I didn't belong. So as you form your professional identity, you want to make sure that you're really infusing your morals and beliefs and not the morals and beliefs that are put on you by somebody else, right? Because when you don't look like, so when you Google like doctor, this is what I did this morning. I Googled doctor, and this is a picture that came up. And it's like, I don't look anything like this guy, right? And most of the people I work with look like this. And so, of course, it's hard to feel like, how am I ever going to become this person when I'm this person, right? So that can be hard to reconcile. So if you're struggling with that, again, just knowing that that's very normal. And once again, who am I? I'm Latina. I'm a general internist, postbac director, medical educator, innovative thinker, work in clinical operations. I have a good sense of who I am as a physician, but I am also a softball player. I love sports. I love to travel. I'm a fierce advocate for diversity, inclusion, and healthcare. I love to laugh. And this is me and my husband, and we like to just hang out. So thank you all for your time. I am happy to answer any questions you have. Oh, a few public service announcements. We have some programs, and actually all of these applications are open right now. Hopefully, I don't know what the best way to get you these links are, but maybe
I've posted the one on the left and the one on the right's been posted on our social media. The middle one, I don't have that, but if you email it to me, I'll post
email it. Okay, great. I will email it. So the postbac consortium application is for the postbac programs in all of California. So if you are graduating from undergrad, and interested, in going to medical school and need help with your GPA enhancement, that would be a good program for you to think about. Avenue M is a new program for community college students who are interested in healthcare. And PreMedCC is a program that's a summer program for first or second year college students interested in going to medical school.
Yeah, we did a bunch of series for summer programs, and that's one of the ones we've talked about. And the middle one, Dr. Green has spoken before too.
Awesome.
But yeah, if you send me the middle one, but the one on the left is actually on our Instagram page.
Oh, great. Well, please apply if you're interested. Okay,
You know a thing or two about that program, right?
What's that?
You know a thing or two about the postbac
I
program.
do, and I'm going to answer this question that has been in here about the postbac program. Let me find it. Okay. So this question, can you discuss more about the postbac program? I'm a first-gen Latina and have a 3.4 overall GPA. So without knowing more about your application, without knowing more about your application, if you're just looking at metrics, a 3.4 GPA is actually high enough to get into medical school. So I would say the next important thing would be to take the MCAT and see where you land. Not everybody needs a postbac program. Postbac programs are really for people who have lower GPAs. And when I say lower overall GPAs, I'm talking about like 2.8 to 3.1. If you're around a 3.2 to 3.4 range, you have a shot at getting into medical school. So for Miss Seha, I would say that take your MCAT, see what you get, and think about applying to medical school.
Yeah, Dr. Campa, there's also been a lot of questions about people wanting to raise their GPA before to get into a postbac program. And can you advise on that a little bit?
Yeah. So I guess, again, it's hard to talk generally because it's a little easier if we sit down and look at your stuff. To get into, so for the at least for the postbac consortium, there is a minimum GPA, which I think is 2.85. So you have to be at least that GPA to be able to apply. And I can tell you that for the postbac, you really just need to hit the minimum. So the more important part of the applications for the postbac is the other things that you've done, what your experiences are, what your perspective is, and how you're going to change healthcare. So I wouldn't recommend doing a bunch of coursework just to raise your GPA because that's not going to make you necessarily a more competitive applicant. As long as you have the minimum GPA requirement, what's going to make you a more competitive applicant is going to be the content of your application being really strong, your perspective coming through very clearly. It's important to read the mission statement of the postbac consortium because that will tell you exactly the type of student that we're looking for, and that can help you formulate your application so that there's very clear messaging around what you care about, what your experiences have been, and why you've done the things that you've done.
Yeah, I think because a lot of times people think that if they want to apply to a postbac program, they have to raise their GPA. So a lot of people are taking open enrollment classes if they have a 2.9 GPA, they say, oh, it needs to be a 3.3. And that's the context that I was asking that question.
Yeah, I don't think that that necessarily makes you a more competitive applicant. I would say at least not for our program. And there are programs in the consortium that do focus more on GPA, but for our program, which is the largest program in the consortium, as long as you have the GPA minimum, that's what we care about. And then we look at the rest of your application. There's another question. Can you give specific advice to people who've worked hard with good stats to apply to many medical schools without any luck? It's extremely hard to overcome imposter syndrome and find strength to restart the application process. California is impossible for non-genius type of students. It seems there's no way to prove enough that your dreams and passion is to work for your underserved community. Thank you in advance. Yeah, so my advice is you really need to get some individual mentorship. I would reach out to somebody, like if there's somebody you've met in one of these forums who would be willing to talk with you. Somebody needs to sit down. There's a reason, usually when people have submitted and not matriculated into medical school, there's a reason. There might be a problem with your application that you have no idea unless you sit down and with somebody who has a lot of experience looking at medical school applications. If you've gotten interviews and you haven't gotten an acceptance, then that means that there's something going on with how you're interviewing. So the mentorship part is really important. So these environments, like the pre-med group, part of it is giving you all resources. So there, I looked on the website, there's a lot of people in admissions that have come to speak. And I would just ask one of them to sit down, like send them your application and sit down and really have an open, honest conversation about what's going on. Because if your stats are really good, then there's something else wrong with your application. Because again, thinking about the AAMC guidelines for best practices around admissions is to look at experiences, attributes, and metrics. Experiences are what you've done. Attributes are like, do you speak another language? What life experiences have you had? How were you raised? What are your ethics and values? Are you from an underserved area? Like those types of qualities are your attributes, and then metrics is the third bucket. But all of those are supposed to be weighted equally, and they really actually are for a lot of schools. So metrics in and of itself is not enough to get people into medical school. They really need to make sure that their written components are solid, their personal statement is as good as it can possibly be. And if it's not where it needs to be, then you'll need to find somebody who's willing to tell you that. I think sometimes people kind of sugarcoat, like they'll review the application and they're scared to share the feedback, but you really need to meet with somebody who will tell you what the problem is. That way you can work on fixing it. And there's lots of non-genius people that matriculate into medical school. I can promise you that. I'm definitely not a genius and somehow got in. Let's see. So wondering if UC Davis offers summer programs or any other programs for postbac students. I'm not eligible for PreMedCC since I'm postbac at community college. Okay, so one possible program, let me see if I can get the link. It's called MS PEP, which is the med school preparatory program. And so if you're doing an unofficial postbac at a community college, that could be a program to look into. Let's see. How does a pre-med student obtain clinical hours while in college? Yeah, Stephanie, that's that can be tough actually, especially in like we're still in like a peri-COVID era, right? So I think the best thing to do is to look at the local hospital. Many hospitals will have some type of programming for pre-medical students where you can shadow. If you have a pre-med advisor at your school, they're also a really important person to talk to. If you're still having a hard time, then reach out to your networks. Like this is an incredible network of people. If there's a way to send a message and say, hey, this is the area I'm in, does anyone know of anyone who'd be willing to take someone shadowing or volunteering? The other thing is to also be able to balance your school load. So the your undergraduate GPA is super important. For some people, they are a little bit distracted doing a bunch of other things, and then their GPA suffers to the point where there's nothing that we can do to have it recover. So you want to make sure whatever you're doing, you're still able to balance it with your coursework. And if you're having a hard time balancing getting other experiences with coursework, then it might be good to take 1 or 2 gap years to get those experiences, because what you don't want to do is like stress yourself out so much to the point like while you're in undergrad that then it affects your GPA. But if you feel like you're being able to manage your classes and you still have time, then my advice would be start with a local hospital, see if they have any programs that they allow people to shadow in. You can also sign up for volunteer services. Most hospitals are going to have volunteer services. And then reach out to your networks to see what other people in your area are doing to get experiences, because there's oftentimes lots of things happening in the area that you live in. And sometimes you might not know about all those things. So use networks like this, networks like Mi Mentor, to really like lean on them to help you find experiences that will be helpful.
Yeah, I just posted a link. We did a 2-hour talk on clinical shadowing experience and steps to do it and what to look for. So it's like a 2-hour talk. It's, and there's steps, there's how to shadow, how to get shadowing, where the best places to get shadowing, how to look up, how to access, how to ask to shadow, like there's a way of asking, and also things that you could do in short, like becoming a phlebotomist, that is really fast and easy that you could do, that you could get into a facility. I know that with COVID has been a little challenging. And so put that link on there, you could watch it. And hopefully it'll be helpful.
And Stephanie, I see you posted another comment. It's incredibly hard in the Atlanta area. Major hospitals closed, people lost jobs. Many hospitals have discontinued their volunteer programs. Yeah, that's been the really hard thing during COVID. Is Emory close by? Because that could be, also thinking about academic centers, because they tend to have more opportunities. So if Emory is close by, that could be another option for you. Sanam Kumar.
And Grady too, Grady Hospital.
Grady, yes. And I think they're an Emory affiliate.
Yeah. And Grady is actually a public hospital, so.
All right. What are your thoughts on doing I don't know what an SMP is. SMP.
Special Masters.
Oh, Special Masters program. After completing 38 units of post-bac with 3.5, got one student beginning with dropped my GPA to 3.5. I actually wouldn't recommend doing a Special Masters program. I am one who believes in applying to medical school. So I always say, like, let the admissions committees do the decision making for you. So my advice for this scenario is to take your MCAT, see what you get, apply to medical school. And if you don't get in, then the next step would be a special master's program. But again, there's not all the special master's programs have great success in getting people into medical school. So you really want to make sure you're looking at, like, linkage programs could be helpful, which are programs that have guaranteed interviews. Those are programs that could be helpful. There's also like, depending on the 1C isn't going to matter at all. Depending on your MCAT score, like, no, people shouldn't have a problem getting to medical school with a 3.5 GPA, even if they got 1C recently. Because again, they're going to be looking at the rest of your application, and that piece is going to be so important. I read so many med school applications, and I cannot tell you, like, people over lean on their metrics. They could have amazing metrics, and you read their personal statement, it's like no perspective. It's terribly written, like the rest of your application is really what gets you into the door for interviews. Metrics just get you through the first pass. This may have been answered, but what are great experiences do by the time someone graduates from a four-year university? I'm currently transferring from a community college. Thanks in advance. So usually medical schools are looking for some kind of research experience, some kind of clinical experience. And those are like the big two buckets. The reason people need research experience is because you're entering a professional environment where you have to think critically, and the skills that you learn by doing research are very much applicable to a healthcare setting. And then for the clinical experience, you need to do enough that you have a sense of what you're getting yourself into. Medical school admissions committees, they want to make sure that people aren't surprised when they arrive. So being able to do something clinical, and the clinical piece can be very variable. Like a lot of people in COVID signed up to do vaccine distributions or COVID questionnaire screenings or, what's it called? Tracking, where you like call people on the phone, even though you don't have
Contact tracer.
Contact tracing, yes. Even though you don't have like you're not physically with the patients, you're still talking to patients. So it can be, you can think creatively about your clinical experiences and what qualifies as a clinical experience. As long as you have some form of patient contact, that will count. Our non-traditional students 2 years out of undergrad.
Can I just add one more thing?
Sure.
I just put this person's at Mount SAC, so I put someone contact in the chat. I'm not going to say it because we're recording, but you could contact her. She's a professor there, and she has a lot of resources in that community, in that area. And if you ask her, she will give you everything. She is a professor there, but she's also on faculty at UCLA. So she has a huge network down there, and you could ask her.
Awesome. All right. Our non-traditional students 2 years out of undergrad eligible apply to UC Davis School of Medicine postbac program. Yes. Next question. What advice do you have on reflecting on our activities and experiences when it comes to preparing for our personal statement and 15 activities? How can we structure our activities in a concise way where it'll tell the admissions who we are as a person? Okay, so everyone, I would say I have a very strong recommendation for how to put together your application. I think across the board, everyone should start with their personal statement, because your personal statement is your mission statement, right? It's who you are, what you care about, what's important to you. It really sets the tone for the application. And I can tell you, most people that review applications, most like across the board, people start with reading the personal statement. The personal statement is like, I cannot stress the importance of your personal statement. Like, it's so important because it really gives the person reviewing your application insight into who you are as a person. So then if you think about the personal statement is the tree, right? It's like the trunk of your application. Your activities are like the branches or the leaves, right? So your activities, like, you want them to complement the things that you care about. So I can tell you, if you read someone's application and their activities are all over the place, like they're dog walking and they're doing COVID contact tracing, and they're doing, I don't know, like playing video games. And then you read their personal statement and they're like, I want to do underserved care. And then you look at their activities and you're like, well, you've not done any underserved care ever. Then it's a disjointed story. So you want to have a very nice story that reads well from beginning to end. So whatever it is that your focus is in medicine, you want to tie your activities into how that's helped you prepare for the thing that you're doing in healthcare. Because remember, being a doctor is just the next step in the career that you've already started, right? And then concise, you don't have a choice to be concise or not, because there is a word limit and it doesn't give you much characters, so you have to be concise. The concise part might come more in your interview, because some people will talk on and on and on. You're like, what are you talking about? I don't know where we've started or ended here. And that is just practice. Please practice your interviews. I cannot stress this enough. There are so many people who don't practice and they show up and they're a mess. So practice, practice, practice. That's really, really important, because like that interview is so important, y'all. What are your thoughts on doing an MD and MPH program at the same time, or you think it's advisable to do an MPH later? Oh, this is a hard question, because I think it's very dependent on the person. Okay. Some people are like, I want to be the public health officer for Contra Costa County. And like you meet them, you're like, they're going to be the public health officer for Contra Costa County. Like everything they do is in alignment with that. They're like, they have a very clear idea of what it is that they want out of their career. For that person, doing an MD, MPH would be great, because you know that they're going to do that. They're going to be the public health officer of something later. So I think it depends. The master's programs to complement your MD, like for some people, you don't really have a good sense of what exactly you want to do yet, which is okay. And for those people, I think waiting a little bit before you do a master's is important, because then when you do your master's, you're going to have a better sense of how you're going to apply that information to your career. So I think it really depends on the person and how sure you are of the career that you want. Not a question. Oh, I was recently accepted. Yay! Into Davis. Awesome. That's so exciting. Congratulations. Someone got into Davis. Yay. Okay. Should someone with a 3.6 GPA and 502 MCAT apply to UC? Yes, you should apply to UC Med School. No, do not retake the MCAT. And no, do not do a postbac. There's nowhere to go but down. Like 3.6 GPA and 502, those are great metrics. Have you all, let me see if I can pull it up, because this might be helpful for you all given some of these questions. Hold on, stand by.
I could look it up too.
Oh, do you have the AAMC metrics, GPA and MCAT metrics?
Yeah, I do.
Oh, okay. Do you want to pull that up?
Yeah.
Okay. I have it too. It'll take me 2 seconds. Let's see who can get it first. So there is actually data around performance for pre-medical students in medical school. Let's see here. Oh, not that one. Let's see. Not that one either. Okay, hold on one second. So I will show you the data. I think this is public data. I'm pretty sure. I think it's okay for me to show you all.
Yeah, you could, the full metrics one, you could download everything.
I think so, yeah.
by gender, by
Oh, not that one. It's the MCAT. Oops. Sorry, this is not the right one. It's the MCAT GPA data. So medical schools very much care about your ability to pass step one. Step one is like the MCAT's big brother. Okay, so the MCAT is a very hard test. Step one is a little bit harder than the MCAT. So that's why oftentimes what medical schools are looking at is their own performance and then their student performance on step one, and then how they're going to predict people will do if they come to their medical school. So there's data that I will pull up eventually when it loads, but around GPA and MCAT scores, and that will tell you where you are as far as competitiveness for medical school. And so 3.6 GPA and a 502 MCAT is very competitive. Your likelihood of passing step one is very, very high, like probably in the 90th percentile. So you should definitely apply to medical school and not retake your MCAT. The reason you don't want to retake your MCAT because 502 is actually a good solid score. And if you come down, then that makes the application look worse. And so it's not worth the risk if you have a good solid score to retake your MCAT and then come down. Don't do a post-bac, please. You're wasting your money because 3.6 is a great GPA. Good shadowing. And if anything, if you wanted to spend the next little bit of time getting research experience, that could be helpful for you. If you have no research experience, it's not the end of the world. Do you have any suggestions around, I think I know Damon Rudders. Hi, Damon. Do you have any suggestions around choosing a desired residency program specialty after medical school? I think choosing a residency program can be hard. The first thing I would say is like, definitely follow your heart. Don't do anything other people tell you to do. Do the things that you love, because this is like your whole career and all these people are going to disappear and then you're going to be stuck with the job. So a lot of people, the decision tree starts at surgical, non-surgical. So everyone in their third year will get to rotate in an operating room. I can tell you for me, like I liked being I hated being in an operating room. It wasn't for me. I liked my surgery rotation and I did not like being in the operating room. So I was definitely it was very easy for me to say non-surgical. And then from there, usually people will kind of decide like the other things. Do you want to work with babies? Do you want to not? Do you want to, like, how long are you willing to do training? Things like that. But definitely get mentors, talk with them regularly, talk to people who are working in the specialty that you're thinking about and what their life looks like, because that's going to be important usually. Like, I don't want to work nights and I don't want to work weekends. I'm here with you all, but usually I take Saturdays off. So I was like not going to do anything involving nights and weekends. And I love my job as primary care. So it just worked out that that was a good match for me. I think we have time. Let's show this table and then maybe do one more question and then we'll stop. Is that okay? Okay, so this is the data from the double AMC. Let me try and zoom it in a little bit. And what this shows is GPA and MCAT scores for all people who have matriculated to medical school ever, and their chances of passing step one on their first attempt. So earlier, the person was a 502 and a 3.6. So you land right here. So anything in blue is like, green light, go. We love you. Please come to our school. We're going to love you forever. The green section is like the yellow light, like probably you'll do fine. Maybe there will be a little bit of pause. The orange section is it's going to be tough with those metrics to get into medical school, but people have gotten in and this is their performance. And I can tell you that I've also had students that didn't fall on this chart at all, and we rolled the dice and we just saw what happened. So for your 5023.6, like, you are totally fine. No more retaking the MCAT, no more GPA enhancement. Just work on your application and get your research. So that's, for me, I'm someone who likes to use data, and that's what helps me advise people. And so I find this data to be very, very helpful in helping people figure out, do they need more coursework, or can they take the MCAT and stop there? Julian, I also have a 3.6. Why is it not recommended to do a postbac, and when is it recommended? So for Julian, 3.6, no postbac because of the data I just showed. I just took my MCAT this week and was planning to apply to medical school this upcoming June. Oh, it's early, it's January. However, I feel like I don't have sufficient clinical experiences because I've been doing mostly research in my undergrad. Would you recommend me to wait another year and spend more time to get clinical experience? So it's January. You're not going to apply to June. You have 6 months to get your behind in a hospital. So that's what I would say. Like, don't wait. Just get the experience. And even if it's a few hours on the weekends until you graduate from college, you'll already have something that you're doing. And then when you graduate, you could do it more. So even if you held on to your application until like middle of June, early July, you would be fine. So I would say not to wait another year just for clinical experiences, just get some clinical experience now. Last question. What are your thoughts on pathway programs that guarantee admissions to medical school without taking the MCAT? Sure, I think they're good. I think you really need to look at what their success rate is, though. And if they have not published their success rate, you need to ask yourself why. So this is the trap: is people promise you a lot, but you need to like show me the data. And if they can't show you the data, or the data they show you is people that aren't similar to you, I would really question if that's the best place for you. All right, y'all. Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys. Did you put that link on there? Oh.
Yeah, I just sent her the link.
Oh, cool. It's also on the general link too. All right. Well, thanks everyone for coming. Thank you, Dr. Campa, for making time.